Chapter 5. Blind Leading the Blind. John chapter 3 verses 9 to 14. Nicodemus can hardly wait to find out how to be born again, so he asked, "How can these things be?" John chapter 3 verse 9. This is the most important question that Nicodemus ever asked, and the most important question that any of us can ever ask is, how can I be born again? Because if you don't know the answer to this question, Jesus says that you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. As Nicodemus was a religious man, he was probably thinking that the way to be born again was to be more religious. He had been born a Jew and attended all the religious ceremonies of the Jews. So did he have to be more diligent in attendance? He had diligently studied and obeyed the Old Testament as a Pharisee. So did he have to be more studious and more obedient? He had diligently led Jewish religious services as an elder. So did he have to work harder to be a better leader? What more could he do? Should he fast more often? Should he give more offerings? He was already so tired, bored, and joyless with so much religion. Could he bear more of it? He was expecting Jesus to answer his question of how to be born again. Instead, Jesus rebukes him. John chapter 3 verses 10 to 13. Jesus first rebukes him as a master of Israel for not knowing how to be born again. He was a blind leader who was leading the blind Jews. Jesus then rebukes his lack of faith. John chapter 3 verse 12. Jesus had clearly explained the need to be born again spiritually because men have a spiritual nature. This is a simple, understandable concept, but he is reluctant to believe this and instead wanted to cling to his religious concepts. Nicodemus had heard of Jesus' miracles and knew that he was not an ordinary man but was clearly from heaven, and yet he found it difficult to accept his teachings. Like Nicodemus, there are many Christian leaders who spend their life studying the details of religious ceremonies. Like Nicodemus, there are many Christian leaders who believe being religious and obedience to these ceremonies will get them to heaven. But Jesus tells us that what's important is not obedience to religious ceremonies, but to be born again. Have you asked yourself this question? How can I be born again? This is the most important question you can ever ask in your life. Ignorance of the answer is a sure way to go to hell.